What's up, guys, and welcome back to Rising Thrills, your number one source for Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland roller coaster content. So let's get right into the video. And this is the story of how the coaster industry has changed from building thrilling coasters to building family coasters. This story really goes back to the early 1900s when roller coasters were still new. It goes back to, from the beginning of coasters, people were trying to build coasters taller, bigger, more thrilling, and it just kept going that way into the early 80s and early 90s when something called the Coaster Wars started, when parks were trying to make the tallest and longest coasters, really to when the Coaster Wars stopped in the early 2000s with Maverick, which was really what ended the Coaster Wars. But that isn't where our story stops. And really, parks were still building coasters that were record breakers even after the Coaster Wars ended, but it wasn't as much of a war to see who can build the tallest coaster, who can build the fastest coaster. It was just, here and there we'd see something like Fury 325 in 2015, other coasters like that throughout, the late 2000s and, the 2010s, around that time. But then recently, the roller coaster industry has really changed to start building more family coasters. And this really isn't just the only thing that has changed. It also has to do with theming because, in the early 2000s with the Coaster Wars and stuff like that. And they were building coasters that really, the only major selling point about the ride was how tall it was or how long it was. And it wasn't really the story behind the ride, which lately has really shifted, especially within the Cedar Fair company. In the early 2000s, they were building coasters, just like Six Flags and other companies that were more record breakers, and there was no story behind the ride. The queues were just, cattle pin queues, and there was no theming or anything in the queues. But then recently, Cedar Fair has done a great job with that, with rides like Iron Menace and Toonbilly, which have been really themed up and have a story behind the ride. But that is one of the many reasons why the amusement industry and the coaster industry has changed. But another thing that has changed, of course, like I said earlier, is the coaster industry building more family coasters. And this is really just, a shift of how family coasters are today from how they were just a few years ago. Family coasters were, just a few years ago, more coasters that were just, kiddie coasters. They were all the same layout, clone coasters, mass-produced at hundreds of parks, and they were all basically the same thing. They weren't really that much of a ride that was like, wow, that's a good ride for a family coaster even. A lot of them were just basic family coasters. And another thing with the modern family coasters is they're not just, off-the-shelf family coasters that are all the same. The newer ones, they have launches, which, they're not intense launches like something like, King to Car or something. They're more graceful launches, with LSM launches compared to, hydraulic launches or stuff like that, or even drive tires. Drive tire launches can be fairly intense, which in the early 2000s, a lot of the family coasters used, like the straddle coasters, and really recently, we have been seeing a huge shift towards more family coasters, and especially a lot of the modern family coasters have been launched family coasters, which is a major shift. In the past few years, over 50% of the new coasters have been family coasters, and most of them have been launch coasters. We've seen this a huge thing with B&M. With their recent coasters have been a lot of family coasters and launch coasters, excluding Phoenix Rising, which is a good example of how the, coaster industry has changed, to make more family coasters, which is a new model, really, because before recently, we only had one of the B&M family inverted coasters, and then Phoenix Rising was the second one, and that was a good example of how the amusement industry has changed. And then other coasters like Penguin Trek at SeaWorld Orlando is a good example. That B&M has been making a lot of family coasters recently, especially in the US coaster market, because a lot of the bigger parks, they already have multiple B&M coasters. So, if if B&M wants to work with the park, the only real option they have now is a family coaster, which is why, especially in North America, B&M has been focusing a lot on the family coasters, family launch coasters, and stuff like that. And really, how the launch coaster has adapted over the years is one of the main reasons why we have been seeing more family coasters, because the modern day launch coasters are more LSM launches, which are more graceful than like hydraulic launches, like I said earlier. So they can be put on family coasters, so then they can make the family coasters more of something to talk about because it has a launch, and really anybody can enjoy it because the launch is one of those elements on a coaster that makes a lot of people enjoy the coaster. So the fact that they're putting launches on these coasters really, can market it a lot better than just a standard family coaster with a lift hill, which, before recently, is why we didn't see as many family coasters and why we really didn't see, as many theme coasters. But now with launches, which a lot of parks have been adapting lately, especially within the SeaWorld chain, a lot of family coasters, Vekoma, B&M, Intamin straddle coasters, B&M family inverted coasters, B&M family launch coasters, Vekoma boomerangs, Vekoma family boomerangs. These are all examples of how the amusement industry has changed from building thrill rides to building family rides. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Make sure you subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.